Damn mosquitoes. What was I thinking? Yeah. Dang, all the thinking about the Sony A7 IV is tiring. I'm gonna take a break. About 50 subscribers from my part 1 video are waiting for me to release my next video on the A7 IV right over here, and I need to give them enough information for their time's worth. Should I start mentioning that the shallow grip, which is too small for my hands and is only comparable to the Sony A7R V? Or shall I start by mentioning the utter disappointment with the rolling shutter performance when shooting stills at 30 frames per second in electronic shutter mode? Oh, no. Let me not start by bashing on the camera that I convinced my wife so hard to get it for me as a Christmas present. Instead, let me start with the story of why the only camera that made sense to me to get in 2025 is the Alpha 7 V. A couple of years ago, I said the Sony A6700 was probably the camera with the least compromise. That still is true for the APS-C camera segment, but in the full-frame world, the competition is quite tight in 2025. Being a Sony user for the past 3 years, I didn't hesitate to scratch all that I had and start new with choosing the right camera system for me, starting with a suitable hybrid camera. My lens requirements are super simple and non-negotiable. I will come back to that later. The partially stacked sensor on the Nikon Z6iii was the topic of the year when it got into the hands of the reviewers. The Nikon Z6iii performs great for both photos and videos. When I used it, the grip felt perfect. I don't have those footage now, so bear with me. What impressed me with that camera was the amount of details I was able to recover from the N-RAW NLog footage. It is quite impressive for me. The stabilization with the Nikon Z6iii was a bit wonky, but I was also filming with 20 to 70mm f4 lens, and God knows what focal length that was. But how can I finalize my purchase with just trying one camera from one system? Then came the Nikon ZR for the win. I was at cloud 9 when I saw that it was a compact style camera and that it didn't overheat. All the other things such as the RED RAW recording and the massive display it offered were just bonus for me. The RED RAW footage was pretty great. I was hand-holding the entire time I tested the Nikon ZR with Nikon 24 to 120mm lens, and the stabilization seemed to work great as well. The price was reasonable. This made me ecstatic until I realized there isn't a mechanical shutter on the camera. Without a mechanical shutter, it isn't a true hybrid camera in my books. But the good thing was that the price of the Nikon Z6iii came down with the announcement of Nikon ZR, at least in Thailand. So I struck off the Nikon ZR and kept the Nikon Z6iii in the to get list. Later, Canon R6iii was announced, and of course, it was the Nikon vs Canon game. It was the 6K 60 frames per second RED RAW Red Log versus the 7K 60 frames per second Canon RAW C-Log2 battle. The Canon R6iii is another great camera. The handling is again great. The buttons are at the right spots except for the photo-video switch. It performs great and it even has more megapixels than the Nikon Z6iii or Nikon ZR. The Canon autofocus is far superior than the Nikon's autofocus, not that Nikon was any bad. For me, all the specs on the paper are awesome. Canon R6 III is certainly in the top position in my list above the Nikon Z6 III, except for the price. I need to cool down a bit. There's something that kept bothering me. What's the bigger picture here? I'm just making content at YouTube as a hobby. Do I actually need such raw format for videos? Now that I think about it, I'm using a 2-year-old Windows laptop for editing. With the increase in file sizes and compression, things will only get harder for me to edit in the future. How am I gonna manage editing such massive files? And how much storage am I going to keep buying? And how will I justify to my wife the hard drive piles that keep increasing? What will I do when I get a Nikon Z6 III or a Canon R6 Mark III? There's no point in getting them if I don't make use of their raw recording capability, right? Will I use these products to the fullest? Oh, I know, there's a format that is super easy on my computer. Oh, how did I not think about the all-intra codec? All these talks about the RAW and OpenGate clouded my judgment. In Nikon, what is it called again? The ProRes 422 HQ with... oh my god, the data rates! At this speed it is no different from the RAW file sizes. Okay, I think at this point I should strike off the Nikon Z6 III from my list because neither my computer can really handle the smaller but highly compressed H.265 files, nor can I keep buying hard drives to store these amazing RAW files. Sorry Nikon, you were at the top of my list with the price and handling, but those file sizes. It's like buying a V12 engine car for $1,000 and burning my money on fuel just to use it. Now let's see if Canon R6 Mark III has all-intra codecs. Oh great! Canon R6 III can record 4K DCI and 4K Ultra HD in H.264 all-intra codec called XF-AVC YCC 422 in 10-bit, 422 up to 120 frames per second. That's awesome. It even has usable bit rates. That's great. But I'm paying so much for similar features to Nikon Z6 III, non-stack sensor, and only use the camera up to 4K video. So the dilemma I'm facing now is that I'm paying for the headline features of the camera, which I may not mostly use. I like the rest, like the frames per second for photos, handling, C-Log 2, but it would bother me forever that I paid for the features I really don't need. The same goes for the Panasonic S1 II as well, which was later announced, seemed exciting in all the ways. But still, the OpenGate, RAW videos, etc. are something I don't really use. Some things I liked about the Lumix S1 II are the capabilities to record directly to the SSDs, backing up SDs to SSDs right from the camera, the screen, and the stabilization. I also like the lenses from Sigma for L-mount cameras. I would pay as much, but I will be paying for more than what I would use. Sony A7V was the last of the bunch, the final hybrid camera of the year 2025. I was hopeful for A7V to have the raw video recording capability at the price of Lumix S1 II. That would have leveled the playing field and I would have to pick one of these anyway, which would have made my choice simpler. I would have chosen Lumix S1 II. I wanted the A7V to not have so many useful features so I can switch systems. But it didn't. The A7V comes with the best quality 4K possible with the 33 megapixel sensor. The 7K downsample to 4K footage in XAVC-SI format, that too up to 60 frames per second, is super detailed. The XAVC-SI is the format I mostly used in the past 3 years in all the Sony cameras I owned, and I felt like this is exactly what I needed. 100% usable. The data rates are only up to 600 megabits per second, which means that they can be recorded using V90 SD cards. No need to get the expensive CF Express Type A cards. but I still have one CF Express Type A card with me because 1TB V90 UHS-2 SD cards are rare and are over $600 while about 1TB CF Express Type A cards are less than $600 with much faster data transfer speeds, which will be helpful to clear the buffer faster for photos. So I am happy that I will benefit from the best of what the camera has to offer without breaking the bank on the SD cards or the hard drives. For me, coming from A7C II, 4K oversampled 60 frames per second recording without crop and with lesser rolling shutter is the biggest reason for considering the A7 IV. Everything on top is a bonus. The dual USB Type-C with much faster transfer speeds in one, the 4-axis multi-angle monitor, and the 14-bit RAW files in continuous burst mode are things that I feel justified to pay for the A7 V. These are a lot more useful features than the RAW or OpenGate video capability that the competition still need to catch up with Sony. Here are some of the other things I love what Sony has offered with the A7 V. Creative looks such as the FL2 and FL3. I started using these JPEGs right out of the camera. They are amazing, the colors look great. Not overheating in Thailand weather under direct sun, filming 4K 60 frames per second in XAVC-SI format for over 30 minutes is something I really appreciate. I don't record long-form videos, so I can't comment about overheating in those conditions. Autofocus is super impressive as always. No matter the situation, busy background or not, the subject detection and the lock-on tracking works impressively. Love it from the camera from the price point. The 4K 120 frames per second is something I wanted, but I'm glad it is just with a 1.5 times crop. I love the footage I get out of it. I even like the 120 frames per second HD footage from the A7C II, so 4K 120 frames per second is definitely more useful for me. Guess what? The data rate is just 280 megabits per second while recording 4K 120 frames per second because it is XAVC HS format. These are the reasons why the Sony A7 V made sense to me, but again, everything is not perfect with this camera. The Sony A7 V doesn't have everything I need, it just has most of them. Of course, every camera has some kind of a compromise. Here are some of the things I wish the Sony A7 V had. Pixel shift mode for when I need it for landscapes and product shots. Faster readout speed so that I can get the birds as they are. Right now the birds have these elongated wings in electronic shutter mode and this is not how the bird actually looks. 4K 120 frames per second in XAVC-SI format. Yes, it would mean that the data rate will be double that of the 60 frames per second, but yeah, it would be easy on my computer. We don't film at such high frame rates all the time, so this should be fine. With that said, I am more than content with the A7 V as it fulfills my content creation needs. Since this video is already getting longer than I wanted, I intentionally left out a lot of things I want to talk about the A7 V in this video. I will cover them in the next part of the series, so stay tuned by subscribing to the channel and hit like if you like this video. Hope you will make a responsible purchase decision. Until then, peace.